Hello everyone and good evening. My name's Don Arleth and you're watching World News Tonight, coming to you live from Warsaw. The US and EU are closer to making a deal on trade, 15% on European imports with a few exceptions. So is this acceptable or will it escalate into an all-out trade war? We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, tonight's headlines. Ukrainian President backs down from over-the-top anti-corruption reform. Russia already attacking NATO using hybrid warfare. Astronaut Sławomir Uznanski-Wisniewski meets with Polish Prime Minister. The European Union is close to striking a deal with the United States to reduce tariffs threatened by both sides after talks between Brussels and Washington made progress. Averting an all-out trade war is the primary goal, although the Europeans might have to give in to the U.S. administration to avoid escalation. Our correspondent, Alex Cartier, has been following the deal or no deal roller coaster and now joins us from Brussels. Good evening there, Alex. Now, are the two sides ready to finally come to an agreement?
Well, good evening, Don. It seems the mood music points in that direction. We heard from the European Commission earlier today. They were asked very specifically if a deal is close, if a deal is possible. They were a little evasive in their answers, clearly, because this is going down to the wire. Nevertheless, let's listen to Olaf Gill, the trade spokesperson of the European Commission, who was asked directly if a deal can be done. This is what he had to say.
Intensive technical level and political level contact is ongoing daily. And as regards a deal, an outcome, we believe such an outcome is within reach, and we are working might and main to deliver that for EU citizens, for EU companies, for EU consumers.
So a deal within reach, that is the message from the European Commission. What deal? Well, we've seen the reporting that would suggest that European goods would have a 15% tariff applied to them on the way into the United States. Now, some of our viewers may think that's quite high. 50% seems quite high, but actually it's roughly where the tariffs are at the moment. There's been a 10% tariff added since April on top of what was, on average, a 4.2% tariff. So 50% across the board would effectively remain things the way they are now. There were some exemptions to that. You mentioned it in your introduction, Don. Medical devices, spirits and airplanes would be exempted from that. Of course, you think of Boeing and Airbus, the trade there, valuable to both sides. So from Brussels' perspective, if this deal goes through, it might be a positive. But again, we have to understand whether or not 15% is a good deal. Well, TVP World spoke to a trade expert on that very topic. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
We don't know, because we don't know what is going to be the tariff schedule for everyone else. And that's very important, because the 30% tariff would be considerably higher than a lot of U.S. Trade Department were going to get in the reciprocal tariff story. But 15% is already quite low compared to that.
So 15%, of course, is only good if other people have more. It would make European companies more competitive in the US market. But if this deal isn't reached, Don, the European Commission very much preparing to retaliate. They have now had the member states approve retaliatory tariffs on 93 billion euros worth of trade with the United States. If a deal isn't reached by the 1st of August, either way, it seems, Don, these negotiations going down to the wire.
Certainly. Now, Alex, at the same time, Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa were in Beijing meeting with President Xi. What did they achieve on that front?
Yeah, some pretty high-stakes negotiations between the three economic superpowers of the world, the US, the EU and China. Well, when it comes to that meeting in China, it had incredibly low expectations, and it's safe to say that it met those expectations. There was no hope of a big breakthrough, and we did not see one. There was a joint statement on combating climate change, something the EU and China have been working on relatively well for years now, but there were frustrations expressed by Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President, about the EU's trade deficit, about how hard it is for EU companies to access the Chinese market. calling on China to use its responsibility to stop Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Now, in terms of concrete deliverables, one agreement, a dialogue mechanism for exports of rare earths. That sounds technical, but it's important. It will allow the EU and China to work together better to make sure that rare earths from China, which are desperately needed for tech companies in the EU, can get here in a smoother way. Not a massive breakthrough, and although the relationship between China and the EU did not perhaps improve considerably, at least it didn't get worse. That will also be a win in Brussels' books. Don?
Well, I guess one step at a time. Alex Cardier reporting from Brussels. Thanks. After 2 days of protests in Ukraine and harsh words from European officials, President Volodymyr Zelensky is backing down from controversial reforms to the country's anti-corruption bodies. They now have declared that the draft law submitted by the Ukrainian president restores all of their powers and independence. They called on the parliament to pass the new law as soon as possible. Our chief political correspondent, Averting, has the story.
These dramatic pictures appear to show Ukrainian soldiers fleeing gunfire in Pokrovsk. The video's location has been verified by news agencies. The date of filming is unclear. But local reports suggest Russia is breaking through into the fiercely contested rail and road hub in the Donbas region. In the northeastern city of Kharkiv, the face of a young child telling the story of Russia's aggressive summer offensive. And back in Kyiv, protest over President Volodymyr Zelensky's government passing a bill to bring the independent Anti-Corruption Bureau under state control, citing Russian moles.
We have been brought here by justified anger because of this law. Absolutely nobody expected Zelensky to sign it.
It's not just in the Ukrainian capital. Across the country, people have been making their voices heard, appearing to force Zelensky back. First, through an evening address on social media.
All provisions for the independence of anti-corruption institutions will remain.
Then a tweet, Zelensky saying he's approved a draft bill that, quote, guarantees real strengthening of Ukraine's law enforcement system and the independence of anti-corruption agencies. Brussels warmed to the change of heart.
We have seen that the Ukrainian government has taken action. We welcome that action. And indeed, we work with them to make sure that these concerns regarding the fight against corruption, which is an extremely important priority for us and for Ukraine as well, are indeed correctly addressed.
It comes after the EU and top officials from across Europe urged Kyiv to reverse the law and warned that Ukraine's EU accession was at stake. Among them, Polish Foreign Minister and newly appointed Deputy Prime Minister Radosław Sikorski, speaking exclusively to TVP World.
As a corrupt country, Ukraine will not make it into the EU. We have to be convinced that the authorities from top to bottom are determined to stamp out corruption.
And with Washington seemingly turning towards Kyiv and away from Vladimir Putin in recent weeks, Sikorski had more to say.
It risks losing the advantage, the political capital that, as you say, has been accumulated.
So why was Zelensky's government so keen to crack down on anti-corruption officials in the first place?
They have proven to be quite successful and able to bring charges against members of parliament, corrupt prosecutors, judges, even high-level intelligence officers in Ukraine, and close associates of President Zelensky.
As the saga played out this week, Ukraine's military intelligence chief, Kyrylo Budanov, delivered a blunt message, saying Ukrainian history shows a nation loses if it's torn apart by internal contradictions. A sobering reminder of what's at stake. Aaron Darman, TVP World.
Ukraine and Russia held their third round of peace talks in Istanbul on Wednesday, and as was expected, there was no major breakthrough for the prospect of peace. The only meaningful progress the two sides have made in these talks since May was to exchange prisoners. For Ukrainians, this has been a blessing as many POWs return home in dire physical and mental condition, enduring systemic torture at the hands of the Russians. Kazimierz Wysiak reports.
A quick hug and the national flag to keep warm, and then a long-awaited phone call with family. These are the first moments of freedom for Ukrainian soldiers released from Russian captivity in the latest prisoner swap. Others have their relatives already waiting for them outside the bus, and these tears are tears of joy.
I cannot express my emotions in words. Finally, my brother is home. Thank you, Lord. Finally, my brother is home.
But while some families celebrate, others are still stuck in information limbo, waiting for any news about their loved ones.
Even a little bit, even something, maybe someone saw something. There's no strength left anymore.
It's no wonder that these families are overwhelmed with emotion. Russian captivity can often be a fate worse than death.
We know a lot about tortures, about the conditions in which the prisoners of war are coming back, being completely exhausted. They are being starved. They deprived from food and water and proper and medical checking. So this is why the earlier we return a person, the better.
During the latest round of negotiations in Turkey on Wednesday, Russia and Ukraine agreed for further POW swaps in the future.
Bringing all our people back is a priority for the state, and we will continue doing everything possible to ensure that every one of our people returns from captivity.
Ukraine also once again proposed a meeting between Presidents Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin to talk peace.
We propose to the Russian side to hold such a meeting of leaders until the end of August. By agreeing to this proposal, Russia can clearly demonstrate its constructive approach to everyone around the world.
But so far, prisoner exchanges have been the only tangible result of the peace talks, as Russia refuses to bring the war to an end. This latest swap brings the total number of Ukrainian prisoners brought home to more than 1,000. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Wysiak.
Polish President Andrzej Duda has sworn in new ministers in Donald Tusk's cabinet following a reshuffle. The government restructuring comes following the defeat of the ruling coalition's presidential candidate in recent elections. Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski has been promoted to the role of Deputy Prime Minister and will now combine the two functions. In the Ministry of Justice, Judge Waldemar Żurek has replaced Adam Bodnar as Justice Minister. There have also been consolidation of some ministerial roles, and two super ministries have been created: the Ministry of Finance and Economy and the Ministry of Energy. With just 2 years left until the next parliamentary election, Prime Minister Tusk's move is seen as an attempt to regroup and regain momentum. Following the mass expulsion of Russian diplomats from NATO countries in 2022, Moscow's intelligence strategy has undergone a significant shift. Instead of relying on traditional spies under diplomatic cover, Russian agencies like the FSB and GRU are now targeting vulnerable populations for covert operations. These individuals, often unaware of their role, are used for sabotage and disinformation campaigns. The goal is less about gathering intelligence and more about sowing fear, division, and weakening NATO's unity over the war in Ukraine. Our reporter, John Todd, shows us how it's done.
Caught on camera, carrying out the Kremlin's hybrid war on the West. The attackers, young men in their early 20s, prime targets for Russian recruitment.
Maybe underprivileged, refugees, migrants, people don't have legal protections in these countries. And so they already maybe feel disenchanted, they feel alienated, so they're naturally an attractive avenue to go after.
Their mark, a London warehouse that ships Starlink satellites and aid for Ukraine. 3 of the gang were convicted earlier this month. It's one of a long list of attacks including arson, vandalism, violence, intimidation, destruction and disruption conducted in a campaign coordinated by Russia to undermine support for Ukraine. New research by the Jamestown Foundation details how Russia's spy masters are preying on marginalized groups, including Russian migrants and Ukrainian refugees, for intelligence gathering and sabotage.
A lot of people in the West simply do not understand that Russia truly doesn't need to send tanks and jets to any of those countries. All Russia has to do is to continue with typical KGB tactics to make divisions within the EU.
Experts say the Kremlin's secret services switched tactics after hundreds of their agents were kicked out of European capitals soon after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The Jamestown Foundation says recruits are often unaware they are part of Russian operations and receive no support from the Kremlin when arrested. Russian operations, which include hacking, now focus less on traditional intelligence collection and more on generating panic and division. The West has begun to repel Russia's hybrid war, but has a long way to go yet. John Todd for TVP World.
Tensions between Russia and Azerbaijan are flaring, and now two Wagner-linked fighters are at the center of the latest twist. Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev says Baku is preparing to sue Russia in international court over a deadly plane crash. As arrests and accusations pile up, the rift is growing deeper and deeper. Diana Skaya gives us the details in this next report.
The spat between Russia and Azerbaijan is full on. On the left is Rustam Aliyev. To the right, Ismail Hassanov. These two Azerbaijani nationals with Russian criminal records were detained in Baku this week. Both are accused of fighting in combat missions abroad. Specifically, they allegedly fought against Ukraine after being recruited directly by Yevgeny Prigozhin and recruited others to do the same. The case is being handled by Azerbaijan's State Security Service. The arrests come as tensions escalate between Baku and Moscow. In December 2024, an Azerbaijan Airlines flight crashed in Kazakhstan after allegedly being hit by Russian air defenses in Grozny during a Ukrainian drone attack. 38 people were killed. Baku blamed Moscow. Then in June, two Azerbaijani brothers, Ziadin and Hussein Safarov, were killed during Russian police raids targeting Azerbaijanis in Yekaterinburg. Russia says they were suspects in a 20-year-old murder case. Azerbaijan accused Russian security forces of brutal killings and demanded answers.
A blunt trauma of chest has been accompanied by multiple displaced fractures of ribs on both sides along several anatomic lines. There are approximately 7 to 8 displaced fractures of ribs on each side.
In response, Azerbaijan detained the head of Russian state media outlet Sputnik's local bureau, along with several Russian IT specialists. The men were accused of drug trafficking. Although Russia says it has no intention of disrupting the Russian-Azerbaijani friendship,
sometimes it happens that difficult periods occur in relations between two countries. Now is one of those periods. We hope that this period will pass. We believe that cooperation between the two countries brings mutual benefits.
The Wagner scandal may prove that the diplomatic relations between both countries won't be flourishing anytime soon, at least not for Azerbaijan. For TVP World, I'm Diana Skaya.
Polish astronaut Sławomir Uznański-Wiśniewski has returned home after the landmark Ignis space mission, marking a bold leap for Poland's role in space exploration. Beyond scientific gains, Prime Minister Donald Tusk hinted that the mission's success could pave the way for a European Space Agency center in Poland. Sonia Garabiszczan reports.
From the International Space Station to Warsaw, the Polish astronaut Sławomir Uznański-Wiśniewski returned to his home country after spending 20 days in space. He may have splashed down on Earth a while ago on July 15th, but the emotions continue to run high, as evidenced by the Thursday press conference at the Polish Prime Minister's office.
I feel like this mission is only the beginning. It was the first mission to the ISS, with significant success, with considerable technological and scientific value from our experiments. In fact, it was the most scientifically and technologically packed mission in the history of short-term flights to a platform like the ISS.
According to the Polish Prime Minister, the success of the Polish space mission could have a number of benefits, including improving the chances of the European Space Agency building a dedicated center in Poland.
As we are speaking, there is a meeting between Finance Minister Domański and the chief of the European Space Agency, who are discussing this among other things.
For the duration of his stay on the ISS, the Polish astronaut conducted 13 scientific experiments by Polish companies and scientific institutions. And there was one experiment that surprised him the most.
An experiment by a company from Lublin, Cortivision, which monitors brain activity. Poland demonstrated the use of a brain machine or brain-computer interface, marking its first ever use in space.
So, in principle, our experiment explains how astronauts can communicate with a machine without engaging any muscles, using only their mind, using only their brain signals.
The Polish space mission, titled Ignis, meaning fire in Latin, was intended to symbolize the reignited Polish spark in space exploration. From Warsaw, for TVP World, I'm Sonia Gatowiszczan.
The corpse flower, or Titan arum, is nature's way of saying, I dare you to sniff me. Towering over most plants and smelling like a dumpster fire at a garlic festival, it blooms rarely, but when it does, it throws the stinkiest party in the botanical world. The University of Warsaw has such a flower and in its botanical garden, which hasn't bloomed since 2021. But that's about to change, and change very soon. Randy Potts makes an inspection in this report.
Welcome to the University of Warsaw's Botanical Garden, where we are here to see the Titan arum, Morphophallus titanum in Latin, but better known as the stinking corpse flower, for its perfume of rotting flesh.
I'm a gardener here, and I care for the plants mostly in the glass houses that we have here. I have not been working here when the arum bloomed for the first time. I've heard the stories, and I can't wait.
We don't know when it will bloom. It could be any time in the next 3 days or 3 weeks. But the last time it bloomed here in Warsaw in 2021, people were lined up across the street both to see it and to smell it. And they were here until 4 a.m. in the morning.
I was present here 4 years ago when it happened, and it was like this kind of botanical feast for all the citizens of Warsaw. We had a queue here until 4 a.m. and so many people came to see. So this time we hope also to invite them all.
This plant is originally from Suriname. It grows up to 3 meters tall, and the smell of rotting flesh hopefully attracts pollinators. But here in Warsaw, it mostly attracts tourists. For TVP World, this is Randy Potts.
Time is running out. The EU is almost at the 11th hour for trade negotiations with the United States to avoid an all-out tit-for-tat trade war. According to the Financial Times and Reuters, diplomats are closing in on a trade deal. And as Chancellor Friedrich Merz pointed out earlier in the week, a deal with the U.S. will not be balanced. We're now talking about 15% tariffs on all EU imports to the U.S., with some exclusions, such as aircraft, spirits, and medical devices. So is this good enough to make a deal? Joining me now to discuss is Polish Deputy Minister of Development and Technology, Michał Baranowski. Good evening, Mr. Minister, and thank you for joining us on World News tonight. So, do you think...
Wonderful to be back with you.
Yeah, great to have you. Nice to see you. So do you think 15% tariffs on European goods, do you think that's a good enough deal that the EU should take to avoid escalation?
It's an excellent question, but I would answer this only when I see this as a deal, and we will answer it together. So an excellent question that I will certainly avoid answering on air. We hope for a deal. We hope for a balanced deal. There are some signs that a deal might be coming. You point to press reports. The negotiations have been very long and difficult, I must add. And it's a bit of a roller coaster, even if we look at the last week or so. So fingers crossed, and EU is staying united in its approach to the US.
Right. Okay. Well, if we are unwilling to discuss perhaps the potential 15%, I mean, I understand that we need to figure out what other countries are paying as well to make sure that Europe makes a good deal rather than just any deal. But if we look at Japan, the United States and Japan made a similar deal. Mm-hmm. And if we look at, say, auto exports, for example, they're very, very close. European Union exports around $47.3 billion in autos to the United States. Japan exports about $55 billion, and Japan took the 15%. Let's just assume that we take the 15%, and that is going to be the deal. Do you think that this is going to negatively hit the European car producers that export autos to the United States?
Look, let me just reiterate, the reasons why I'm not going to discuss the details of it is because we are negotiating. It would be pretty forward for one of the deputy ministers in one of the member states to say that a potential deal that may or may not be on the table is good enough for us. We are looking for a balanced one. Now, any tariffs above zero are not good for, are worse than the alternative for European producers and for American consumers. Let's remember that those tariffs are being paid by American consumers. For those in America that might be watching me, that's really where the buck stops. Now, right now we have been in a moment of escalation when it comes to cars, when it comes to steel and aluminum, and the deadline of August 1st is coming fast. And this is why also Europe made it very clear that we have a retaliatory package that was agreed this morning, and that if US is going to increase tariffs, we'll do so as well. And this is all in order to reach a negotiated solution on both sides. Maybe I'll stop here.
Okay, so the retaliatory tariffs today, and I'll remind our viewers, are worth 93 billion euro in total, agreed to today by the European Parliament, or the European Commission. Now, there's also the so-called bazooka option, which is the anti-coercion instrument, which could block U.S. firms from public tenders, revoke IP protection, and restrict imports and exports. Now, if we get to that area, would you agree that we're in the worst phase of a U.S.-EU trade war, and essentially that would shut down all trade between the two countries? I mean, the EU and, of course,
it's not exact. Right. It's not exactly how it works. What would shut down large portion of the trade is if the United States decided to raise tariffs at 30% or above, and we as EU would have to retaliate. One of the options that is just being discussed, but it's not, most of these things are discussed in a very private settings, often without phones even, because they are so sensitive, is the anti-coercion instrument. It's not something that has been officially put on the table. The discussions are ongoing. It's not something that would be used immediately. It's a process that even when the Commission triggers it, takes a number of months. But then it's described as trade bazooka because it does not only pertain to goods, but also to services. And let's just put the bigger picture for the viewers. We are talking, these are not technical conversations we are having. This is the most vital economic relationship that both Europe and the United States has. And it's something that underpins our strong transatlantic alliance. So we are now talking about trade, but in fact, it's something that has immediate impact on our political relationship across the Atlantic, and that's why it's so important.
It certainly does. It certainly does. And Europe lately has been really jittery about the United States commitment to NATO, the commitment to Ukraine, but we were starting to witness sort of a turn of the corner. We're seeing the reestablishment of better relations between the Trump administration and Ukraine. We also see the United States reaffirm NATO in Article 5 a few times in recent months. So with that whole situation shored up, this seems to be the one last holdout. Are you confident that a deal will be made here by August 1st? Excuse me.
I'm pretty confident at this point. But even though that today is, I believe, July 24th, this is still a long way to go. I'm having conversations twice a day with our ambassador in Brussels, who is in constant touch also with the Commission. The member states are meeting lately once a day because it's such a roller coaster, because it's such a dynamic development. As you said, we have gotten a number of areas, especially on security and defense and at the NATO summit in The Hague, where we were able to reach transatlantic agreement. So, in that spirit, I'm both hopeful, and this is very much the line that Polish government is taking, that we reach not only we stay united in Europe and we reach a good transatlantic deal. And when we have this deal on the table, we'll be able to really say whether this is something good enough or not good enough from our national perspectives and from our EU perspectives. And if we are not happy with the deal, then we'll have to think about alternatives. But we are not there yet. And I hope that when we meet next week, we'll be much closer, if not already at a level where an agreement has been achieved.
Okay, well, we'll be keeping our fingers crossed, and thank you so much for joining us tonight, Polish Deputy Minister of Development and Technology, Michał Baranowski. Thank you. And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.